guys, what's up? This is going to be my review of Sweeper's album, Bloodied Unbowed. Now what I will initially say is that when I first heard this album, I was really blown away by what I was hearing. I really thought it was something special. I really thought it was like could be contender for album of the year. That thought did go through my mind. But as I've listened to it more and more, it's come down a little bit for me. I think that's because, well, there's several reasons, and I'll get into them. But just so you know, this is not going to be like an album of the year contender. Now, as far as the lyrical content of this album, I can say that this is where it really excels, I think. The lyrical content is really, really strong. Not only is the lyrical content strong, but the delivery of the lyrics is really, really good. I don't think I can really take much away from the lyrics at all. There's really a lot of good stuff there. So to begin the discussion of the lyrics, it starts off with Let It Wave, and this is a track, it's heavy, but it's not their heaviest song on the album. I would say, you know, the lyrical content is pretty good there, I want to say. One thing I want to point out though is that this is something that is either artificially done and it just sounds this way to me, or it's intentionally done, and it's something that's really cool, but it almost sounds like the lyrics of the songs is a progressive manner as you listen through the album. This is a really cool aspect, and I don't think a lot of people really understand that this is a cool little secret, if it is in fact true, that they kind of progressively made the lyrics say something more and more and more as you read through the album. Now, I also want to say there's strong tones of symbolic language in this album. There's a lot of symbolic meanings behind what he's saying, wave your flag sort of thing, you know, and what does that mean? Well, that takes thought to sort of think about what that means. I also want to say that these themes, these symbolic themes that the lead singer brings up, is really quite something special, I think, in terms of what we can expect more from Sweeper in terms of their creativity of lyrics. Now, some of these themes are like, you know, wave your flag. That would be one sort of symbolic thing. The other thing is the thing between a spider and a fly, and the difference between those two things, and that's also a symbolic thing. But the number one thing that I see that is used the most in this album in terms of symbolism is the idea of ships and being out at sea and colliding with things and getting to shore and all this type of stuff, and it makes for a very rich experience listening while you're reading along in the lyrics. So really, there's a lot of good things to be said about the lyrics and the presentation of the lyrics. Now, the way this guy screams is pretty cool, I gotta say. It sounds really good to me, and what's better is it sounds different. And the thing that I really like about it is that it sounds really intense, and that's really cool when a vocalist can use their voice in a way that makes it sound like they're just really, really intense at that moment. You know, that's kind of what you want out of a lyricist. Moving on to the musical aspects of this album, there are some really cool parts in this album that just really are stimulating and very capturing in terms of what they're playing. I have some things going through my head occasionally, and this is combined with the lyrical presentation as well. The music goes along well with the lyrics. Now, that being said, it does seem like the lyrics came first and the music comes after that. That's not a bad thing, that's not a slight at them, that's just an observation that I've kind of made. It can work either way, in my opinion. They work both work equally well. It's just a matter of what the artist wants to do. Now, the musical sound of what this sounds like is pretty cool, I want to say, but I want to say that the head point of this album is the vocals. And the vocals kind of color up the rest of the musicianship of the album that makes it sound better. Not to say that this is poorly played music at all. It's just that it seems that the lyrical presentation goes along really well, and it seems that the musical composition actually complements the lyrics and vocals. So as far as a rating, let's get into the categories, shall we? Now, the first thing that I want to base it on is the backbeat. Now, the backbeat is pretty good. It's not perfect. There's some times where it's kind of like, oh, what? I thought there was going to be another beat there, or I thought there was going to be another string of rhythms or whatever. And that sometimes it just ends on a kind of a awkward, like, what's going on here type of thing. And I think this might be intentional, but it doesn't do well for the particular category of backbeat. And when you associate this with the notes, now if you listen to the notes are actually pretty cool. They're kind of, I almost want to say the notes are rhythmic, but they're rhythmic in a way that is a little bit more progressive. So as far as a rating for the backbeat, I'm going to give that a 1.7 out of 2. Now all these things are out of 2 and it adds up to 10 because I have 5 categories, just in case you didn't know that. Now as far as the notes go in combination with it being rich and complex, I don't know how much I can take away here. They do a really good job of making these notes sound really rich and complex. It gets a little bit repetitive in some areas, but ultimately it sounds like it's supposed to. Now this is metalcore, so you're not going to get a whole lot of progressive stuff, but I will say that it does sort of have this progressive undertones to it in the note playing as far as the rich and complex is concerned. And this is really nice to hear from a metalcore album. You know, I would almost say that this is sort of a progressive metalcore in terms of how it sounds, in terms of the notes, in terms of the lyrics. It almost sounds like more like a progressive metalcore rather than straight metalcore. So I will probably dock it maybe 0.1, maybe 0.2 for the notes in terms of how rich and complex they are. Now as far as rich and complex and comparing that to the composition, this is also a category that I think they do fairly strong at. I wouldn't say they do perfectly at this. Like I said, it gets a little repetitive in some areas. But that being said, it's music, and sometimes music is repetitive, so you can't dock them too much on that. But it's enough that it's a little noticeable after listening to the album a number of times. So they'll play the same sort of thing, like 4, 5, 6 times in a row. This sort of pattern of notes, and it almost seems like it would be nice if they could move on to the next segment of the song at some parts, but ultimately it still sounds good. So as far as the rich and complex and comparing that to the composition, it's compositionally fairly good, but I will say that the rich and complexness could be a little bit more complex, and this is where it's kind of weird to say because I just got done saying it sort of sounds like a progressive sort of playing. So this is an interesting dynamic that it's not perfect in, that it kind of has an element of progression, but it also has an element of we're going to play this thing a number of times to make sure that you understand what we're playing. And that can work out well, but it can also work out sort of bad as well. So just bringing that to your attention. So how good do they do at the rich and complex? Well, I would say probably about a 1.7. I would say, yeah, that would be probably where I would put it. Now, in terms of the composition in combination with listenability, this is a fairly listenable thing, but it's not super listenable. And the reason I say that is because I think the vocal style can be very off-putting for some people. And some people are not going to like this vocal style at all. And so, since so much is built upon the vocal style, I'm going to have to dock them on that. It's not going to be as a perfect way of coming across that everyone can appreciate it. And that's not to say that the composition is bad. I think the composition is fairly good, but I will say that the album as a whole is definitely really good in terms of one song to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. I would say in this regard, the composition is really, really good. But when you look at the individual songs and the composition within those songs, like I keep saying, is it gets a little repetitive at sometimes. And that's not a dock. It's just I kind of wish that it was a little bit more variation along the way, if you know what I'm saying. So I'll probably dock them, or I'll probably measure them up to about a, I don't know, a 1.5 on the rich and complex category. Now, as far as the listenability in comparison to the backbeat, this is a pretty good category, but it's not the best. It's not their strongest point. It's somewhere in the middle between what they have there. There are points where it sounds like really cool to listen to, I will say. And in relation to the backbeat, like I said, the backbeat by itself is kind of like, it ends sometimes and it's like, okay, you ended there, why? So in terms of listenability and that association with the backbeat, it gets docked a little bit there too. So I'm going to measure it up to about a 1.6 on that category. That's what it's going to be for that. So as far as an overall rating for this thing, it's going to average out to an 8.3. Thanks for watching my review of Bloodied Unbowed by O Sweeper.